On the stage are Chancellor Michael Wilson, myself, and our honorary doctorate of today, William Graham. The three of us met at Trinity College in 1957, 61 years ago. We've been friends ever since, as we've moved in and out of our lives, our public lives, and our private lives. And it is a great privilege and a mark of the loyalty to this university and to Trinity College that we are here together today. I hope that maybe some of you in 2079 can say the same. The Honorable William Graham. In 1960, at the age of 21, a young man at Trinity College in Toronto went to Europe with a friend, taking a Land Rover from Paris to Lahore, Pakistan, passing through Baluchistan, Afghanistan, the statues of the Buddhas in Bamiyan, and other little choice spots along the way. His friends at Trinity, including me, waved him an incredulous goodbye, and after he returned, for the next 3 years, we were able to plumb the depths of the Middle East, the Great Race, and the intricacies of Southeast Asian politics through our friend Bill Graham. That adventurous decision, taken so early, was emblematic of a personality which was not only going to prove itself through his brilliant academic achievements, graduating with the gold medal from the University of Toronto's Faculty of Law a few years later, but also in his idiosyncratic but graceful choice of the way that he would live his life. At a time when most young lawyers were digging in to make their corporate chops felt, Bill picked up everything, including a wife and 2 children under 2.5, to go to Paris, to learn French fluently, and to do a doctorate in law at the University of Paris. Those of us who have been fortunate to be witnesses to Bill's life and career take these things for granted, but of course it means that we have been extraordinarily entertained and educated by everything that he has done. Returning to Canada, he joined Fasken Calvin and worked on one of the most important law cases involving Canadian interests of late 20th century in Canada, the Barcelona Traction Light and Power Company case. His many sojourns in Europe with this case over a number of years in the 70s were recounted to those of us who cared in absorbing, fascinating, and frequently hilarious detail. As for instance, when the Spanish delegation discovered that there would be no longer Marqués de Riscal wine available, they picked up their gowns and promptly left. It was not possible to continue the case under the difficulties of not having an appropriate wine to drink. Bill Graham certainly sympathized with that. But as we had always suspected, Bill's reach was going to be into the deepest parts of our public life. After paying his dues by running for federal office twice, in 1993, he successfully became the Member of Parliament for Toronto Centre Rosedale, a seat which he held with hard work and determination, earning great personal popularity until he retired in 2007 while serving as Leader of the Opposition. The remarkable career that began in that Land Rover made him the ideal person when he first entered politics to be the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, where he was much lauded for bringing intelligence, bipartisan activity, and a deep personal understanding to one of the most important parts of our parliamentary system. This led to his career as Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs and then Minister of Defense. No one in his generation has had better qualifications in his education, life experience, bilingualism, and knowledge of the world than Bill Graham. To all his posts, he brought the most distinguished character, a brilliant and incisive mind, and the most extraordinary sense of humor. As soon as he had left active political life, Bill Graham was appointed Chancellor of Trinity College, and for the last 11 years, his leadership and innovation and generosity have meant that all the things that he began at that college in 1957, when we were all together as students, are continuing to benefit upcoming generations. 5 years ago, he established the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary International History, which continues innovative approaches to political life, contemporary history, and the creation of viable ways of being active in public life. His personal generosity in supporting many other causes is given selflessly and very often anonymously. A brilliant mind attached to sound judgment and enormous human compassion makes for an extraordinary human being. This human being entered public life in order to benefit others and to show the way to all, as did Tennyson's Ulysses, how to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Chancellor, on behalf of the Governing Council, I ask you to confer the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon the Honorable William C. Graham.
On behalf of the University of Toronto and by virtue of the authority vested in me, I have the great honor and pleasure of conferring upon you, as I do now, the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.
Well, Mr. Chancellor, President Gertler, Provost, distinguished guests, my fellow graduates from Innis College, it's wonderful to see you here today. From Trinity, you're the salt of the earth. I must say, when I was in your place, 1961, I certainly didn't think I'd be back here one day. The same place, surrounded by my family, so many friends, Kathy, my two children, Patrick and Katie, and I'm certain that my two sisters who are here from Vancouver, Sheila and Helen, I wouldn't have believed that the little guy who caused all the trouble for them all the time would be up here. But then when I look around the room, I think probably there's some quite surprised siblings up there somewhere wondering how the heck you got here too. So we're all in the same boat. And I couldn't have foreseen for sure that I would be introduced by a rather exotic young woman who I met at St. Hilda's, taking 6 lumps of sugar in her tea. So I went over to her and we had engaged in a wonderful conversation, and then by some weird fate, some years later, I'm standing in Rideau Hall being sworn in as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense by the lady with the lumps of sugar in her tea. Thank you, Adrian, for that kind introduction and for the years of friendship and support that lay behind it. You too have been honored by this university with a doctorate, as well as by Trinity, and I know that you will agree with me when I say what a signal honor it is to be recognized in this way by this great Canadian institution, where we both received that foundation of learning that informed our subsequent life's work. During those early years, we made friendships here, as was said, some of whom I'm fortunate to have on the stage with me today. I was lucky enough to get to know my wife, who was at St. Hilda's. So watch out there for those of you who have been going back and forth across from St. Hilda's to Trinity. Remember, we celebrated our 56th wedding anniversary the other day, so you can establish some long relations. Yes. But you know, when we were here, the University of Toronto wasn't quite the leading global institution it is today. But it was a great institution. We had the great privilege of being exposed to the minds of like Northrop Frye, Borolaskin, Dean is here, member Borolaskin, our Chief Justice, Marshall McLuhan, when you could get him to stop drinking whiskey long enough to talk to you. All were intellectual giants, yet all eminently accessible and determined to impart to their students a body of knowledge and a set of values that insisted upon rigorous intellectual honesty and the search for an objective truth based on ascertainable, not alternative facts. I studied history and law. You will have studied many other disciplines. And as was said by Madam Clarkson, you won't know what this place looks like 61 years from now, what Canada, it was incomprehensible. Today's Canada would be incomprehensible to us in 1961. But I do know one thing, that if you're like me, the golden thread that will link you to your future and determine how you deal with it will have been forged in the disciplines and values that you have acquired at this place. Given my career, perhaps it won't surprise you if I deviate a little bit to speak about politics. And I'm going to maybe set aside my speech and speak to you just directly. It's a bit dangerous because they're very definitive up here about keeping me to 10 minutes. And actually, with a written speech, it's easier to stay in than when you wander off. But I'm mindful of a great time. I remember being down at White House one time, and George Bush, who was an unusual president, but a nice person, was attacked by the press for having said something that was inconsistent with something he'd said the day before. And he sort of thought for a moment, and he looked, and he said, well, he said, I didn't actually say that. That was in a speech that I read. So, you see, speeches could be one thing. Saying things are other things. So what would I like to say to you today? I'd like to say to you, and I'm conscious of the fact that so many of you are here from other countries, that I may sound a little bit too Canadian-centric, but after all, my life was in Canadian politics, but it was international politics in many ways. I'd like to urge you to think of a public life as you leave here. Your responsibilities as a citizen. That was certainly taught us by those professors that I referred to. Socially conscious professors at the law school who were extraordinary, but my history professors. What can you do in public life? And I don't mean by public life necessarily a political life. I mean, I wasted my life in politics. The Honorable Michael Wilson, perhaps an unfortunate choice of party, but he was a responsible person in the Parliament and a leader in his day, and I'm sure he would agree with me that politics at times can lead you into dark valleys, but the peaks, when it works, are exceptional because you're of service to your country and you can change things in ways that are difficult to change in any other way except for in the legislature of your country. Nothing could be more honorable than to be chosen by your peers to represent them in the legislature of your countries, whichever country you have come from. But politics isn't just political politics. Professor Moran, who's here, as our provost, has been involved in the political life of this community through her extraordinary work with Indigenous people. The Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson impacted on the national life of our country in a way when she was the representative of the Crown. And looking around this room, I don't think any of you could probably define exactly what is the nature of the Crown in Canada. But I must say, Madam Clarkson, when you were there, you incarnated in a beautiful way. So, I was lucky, as was pointed out, to go to Paris and do a doctorate. And that is something I'd like to leave with you, my fellow students. Think, so many of you are already bilingual because so many of you come from backgrounds. It was a little more unusual in my time. But for those of you who get an opportunity to study abroad, to learn another culture, to acquire the sense of viewing people through another lens, through their lens, it's an extraordinary opportunity. It changes you and enables you to be a better person in your own country and in the world. It is something I really highly recommend, and I'm glad to see that the universities are trying to encourage more of this. And I'd like to, our governments used to be more supportive of study abroad, and we should be doing it. Canada is a country that is deeply integrated into the world, and the more you can get out, see that world, acquire other people's views of what that world is, the better you're going to be as a citizen, and the better you're going to be able to contribute to your own society. We had the great fortune, or our lives, if you like, were transformed to some extent by the forces of what we call globalization. Our lives were transformed by the fact that we became more and more integrated into the world. And that's why, in a way, I went to Parliament determined to be the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to work to be the foreign minister, to work to understand how global forces shape and force us as a country and us as a people to adapt to global forces outside. So I see politics very much as something as determining how we can create the right framework within our own countries to deal with the global forces that are outside there. And we have to do that. It's more and more true today. When we hear these voices of countries and people saying that they're going to be more independent, they're going to be totally alone, they're going to be able to carry their own destinies, this isn't going to happen. Your life, you're going to be called upon to be even more and more integrated. I mean, we've got the internet today. We've got so many forces of both good and evil that are happening out there in the world. That's going to affect your lives. It's going to increase. It's not going to get less. So I think you are going to be called upon to do things even beyond what we did. I'm very proud of what our generation achieved in the international field. I'm very proud of when I think, for example, of something like the various trade agreements that we achieved for greater economic prosperity for our countries, the security agreements we achieved, how, in my own time, international law became something that was significant. When I went, Dean, close your ears because this will be offensive, but when I went to the law school, international law was just a marginal thing. Dean Wright said to me, "You're going to study international law in Paris? Are you crazy? You're wasting your life. You've got to go to Harvard and learn torts." Well, I went to Paris and got international law. And international law has changed. And as Professor Kennedy at the law school in Harvard said, today, law is a language of legitimacy. And legitimacy is the key to power. Law, international law, is important. And we saw enormous strides in that development. But today, you and we look at a world that is changing. Who would have foreseen that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we'd see right-wing governments springing up in Eastern Europe? That we'd see a renascent, aggressive Russia, the violation of international law flagrantly in places like Crimea, the South China Sea, and elsewhere. This is not the world that we tried to create. It is, as our foreign minister, Chrystia Freeland, said the other night in a wonderful speech down in Washington, where she got a much-merited award, liberal democracies are under threat. And with them, the world order that we created and is so important for Canada and for Canadians. By the way, I don't know if any of you saw this morning's newspaper, but there was a picture of Chrystia riding her bicycle up to the Ontario legislature. I kind of like to live in a country where the foreign minister rides around a bike. It tells you something about us. And I suppose most worrying for those of us who are concerned about what is happening in the world today, and I join our Mexican friends, if there are some here, and I know there will be, is that to see what is happening in our neighbor to the south, where, without getting into the depths of the steel tariff and the other problems and other issues that we're looking at, Chancellor and I were speaking about the gravity of the situation on the way over here. It is a serious situation. It's a serious situation because our prosperity, our security is inextricably linked with that of the United States. And it's been something we've created together. The world order as we know it was created in the image of the democratic values that were led by the United States of America. And we supported that. Sometimes we didn't. We didn't go to Iraq because we thought it was a mistake. But most of the time, Canadians have been highly supportive of the United States. Not because we happen to be dependent on them, but because they were offering great leadership to the world. But today it would seem, from the actions and the vocabulary being used, that in fact that those who had created the world order, which we so much depend, are determined to bring it down. To bring it down, in fact, have become the enemies of the very structures of the international system which has given the world the prosperity and security this time which it needs. I mean, the steel tariffs being applied to Canada and all the European nations, the greatest allies of the United States. So this is very puzzling to us and very worrying. I think our government is right. I think Canadians are right. And you will feel the same because you've got American friends and you've got American family. I was speaking a while ago to a bunch of American legislators from different states. And they were all saying, we're puzzled by this. We want to keep our contacts with our Canadian colleagues and our Mexican colleagues. And there's a deep well of feeling down there that is not that. So we have to get over that animosity. We have to get over the rhetoric and understand that deep well of friendship and relationship and depth of relationships that's there. I remember one time I was talking down in Los Angeles and I said, oh, Canadians are really different from Americans. I was talking, it was the time when we just adopted the marriage bill, equal marriage bill in the House of Commons. We were very proud of that. And I was perhaps foolish. I talked a little bit about gun control. It's not a good idea to talk about in the States. But, and however, at the end of my speech, a little old lady got up at the back of the room and she's just sort of said, Mr. Graham, I just want to say one thing to you. I said, what's that, ma'am? There are more people in California that think like Canadians than there are in Canada. So just remember that when we think about the United States. It's a big country, and there's a lot of people that are great friends there. I have a wonderful quote from President Clinton, who said something profound about the nature and consequences of the use of power. He said, the United States has two choices about how we use the great and overwhelming military and economic power we now possess. We can try to use it to stay top dog in the global bloc in perpetuity, or we can use it to try and create a world in which we will be comfortable living when we are no longer top dog in the global bloc. Canada has never been top dog in the global bloc. Canada has always tried to create that world where everyone can be comfortable living in reciprocal, respectful relationships. I believe to some extent this is a result of our DNA. I think it's a result of the original compact between two cultures, French and English, which had to recognize that if they're going to survive, they had to support one another and recognize the validity in one another. And not say I'm in charge, but rather I recognize your value. And then, fortunately, we were to bring our Aboriginal friends into the picture. Too late, but we now are doing it. And our multicultural society is one that depends on that mutual respect. So let me leave you with the thought. In your lives, think about politics. Think about getting involved in the politics of your country, but if not politics, at least be participants in this society. And remember Tip O'Neill's advice, all politics is local, but problems today tend to have global dimensions. So perhaps think global and act local. And true global or national solutions can only be achieved by an understanding of the other person's perspective, or empathy. Empathy, in the end, is more effective than the most transient effect of power politics. And of one thing I'm sure, all of you will have had the opportunity, as our generation did, to build on the advantages of having been educated in this very special place, to have lived in this vibrant city and privileged country. And I'm confident that you will, through your lives and through the benefits of your privileged education, search for ways wherever you are to make yours a better community, a better city, a better country, and ultimately a better global space upon which our collective future so much depends. Thank you very much.